Before we begin this show, Civil Defiance, we want to make something perfectly clear. The commentary and analysis regarding political matters are based on public documents, widely published reports, and constitutionally protected political opinion and hyperbole of the host, Otto Bismarck. This episode dissects a specific blueprint for governmental transition, focusing on the archetype of centralized power and the effects of its policy proposals, not the private conduct of any individual. The term shadow mandate is used here as hyperbolic political metaphor for a comprehensive, publicly available plan. We are not asserting any factual claims regarding secretive or criminal conduct. The views expressed are solely the host's and do not reflect those of anyone else. We're Civil Defiance, and this is your 60-minute deep dive into the most controversial plan of 2025.
Welcome to Civil Defiance. I'm Otto Bismarck, and this is our most critical episode to date. Today, we are not discussing a politician or a scandal or even a past event. We are dedicating a full searing hour to a blueprint, a 900-plus page document that, in my opinion, represents the most profound, controversial, and dangerous conspiracy in modern American history. I call it the Shadow Mandate. Its proponents call it a plan for accountability. Its critics call it a blueprint for autocracy. I call it the Uni-Party's most explicit battle plan for controlling the state. The ultimate conspiracy of 2025 is not a secret plot in a smoke-filled room. It is a meticulously detailed, publicly available document designed to weaponize the government against the citizens. The shadow mandate is built on one core, terrifying philosophical foundation, the Unitary Executive Theory. This is the idea that all executive power rests solely with the executive, and every single federal employee, bureaucrat, and agency head works for and serves at the pleasure of the president. This theory stands in direct opposition to the independent bureaucracy that has governed this country for generations. The Uni-Party on both sides has, for decades, allowed the administrative state to grow its own power, but they always feared one thing: a leader who would actually try to control it. This mandate is the first step toward that total control. The first and most explosive proposal in the mandate is the elimination of civil service protections for potentially tens of thousands of federal workers. This isn't about firing bad employees. It's about replacing career experts from the Departments of Energy to State with political appointees loyal not to the Constitution, but to the sitting executive's specific faction. This is the Uni-Party's ultimate dream: to replace competence with absolute loyalty. They want a political army, not an independent civil service. I contend that this move alone destroys the non-partisan function of government. If the entire Department of Justice, the entire FBI, and the entire National Institutes of Health can be purged and replaced by loyalists between Election Day and the inauguration, then the rule of law has been replaced by the rule of the political faction. This is the single most explicit power grab detailed in the entire document. The Uni-Party is fighting a zero-sum game, and the losers will not just leave office. They will be systematically exiled from the entire machinery of the state. This is how a republic quietly dies. The mandate does not stop at firing bureaucrats. It explicitly details the weaponization of two key agencies that control the flow of information and the enforcement of law. First, the Department of Justice. The mandate calls for a complete ideological overhaul of the DOJ, shifting its focus and its priorities. This means the systematic investigation and prosecution of policies deemed politically or culturally unacceptable by the incoming administration, such as specific diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, or so-called anti-white racism. This turns the DOJ from an agency committed to impartial law enforcement into a political battering ram used to enforce the dominant ideology of the governing faction. Furthermore, the document contains proposals that, in my opinion, reward the Uni-Party's base by attempting to derail efforts to stop election disinformation. It sends a clear message to social media companies: stop limiting the spread of election falsehoods, or face the wrath of weaponized federal agencies like the FCC. Second, the Federal Communications Commission and the assault on free speech. The mandate explicitly encourages the FCC to work with Congress to use anti-discrimination protections to punish media companies that restrict or limit the visibility of user content reflecting core political viewpoints. This is a direct threat to the editorial discretion of every media platform in the country. They are trying to coerce private companies into allowing any and all political rhetoric, no matter how false or inflammatory, under the threat of massive regulatory fines. This is the Uni-Party maneuvering for absolute information control. When one faction controls the executive and the executive is armed with this mandate, they can turn the DOJ into a private army and the FCC into a political censor. This isn't about freeing speech. It's about forcing platforms to carry politically advantageous propaganda under the guise of free expression. It is a stunning, cynical use of federal power. The mandate's proposals regarding science, health, and education are just as volatile and far-reaching. The core idea is that research funded by the taxpayer should serve the national interest in a concrete way in line with conservative principles. This is the death of independent inquiry. Science is not supposed to serve a political mandate. It is supposed to serve truth. The document proposes deep cuts to research that does not align with their ideological goals, specifically targeting climatology research and efforts to make the National Institutes of Health less independent. This is a proposal for scientific censorship. If a career scientist knows that pursuing certain lines of research, such as climate change or stem cell therapy, will lead to the immediate defunding of their lab or the dissolution of their department, they will self-censor. The Uni-Party seeks to control the output of knowledge, not just the input of policy. In education, the plan is equally radical, closing the Department of Education, giving states total control, and transferring civil rights enforcement to the DOJ to be handled only through litigation. This is not decentralization. It is an effort to curtail federal oversight on issues of equity and race, transferring that responsibility to a politically controlled DOJ that will enforce the law selectively. The proposal to let Title of O funding expire, removing billions of dollars from schools in low-income areas, while championing school vouchers with no strings attached, is an explicit move to defund the public education system in favor of private and religious institutions. This mandate sees education not as a public good for the advancement of the nation, but as a political tool to enforce ideological conformity. Ultimately, the shadow mandate is a high-stakes public conspiracy that transcends the political differences we normally argue about. It is the final battle for the Uni-Party's soul. The two factions of the Uni-Party agree on centralized power. They agree on a massive surveillance state. They agree on eternal wars and crippling debt. Their disagreement is only over who gets to hold the weaponized state. The current sitting executive and their faction use the administrative state as it exists, slowly, bureaucratically, through regulation, institutional inertia, to advance their agenda. The faction behind the shadow mandate wants to replace that slow bureaucracy with a swift, politically loyal dictatorship of the executive. It's a fight over the method of control, not the principle of control. This mandate is the moment of reckoning for all of us. We must ask, is our liberty better served by the slow, suffocating overreach of the current bureaucracy or by the swift, punitive loyalty of a politically purged executive branch? I contend the answer is neither. Both paths lead to the demise of the republic. The ultimate civil defiance against the shadow mandate is threefold. Read the document, defend the non-partisan, and localize the fight. Focus every ounce of your energy on strengthening local and state checks on power. The executive cannot purge a city council, a local school board, or a state legislature that is committed to civil defiance. Build up your local institutions until they are too strong, too defiant, and too sovereign for the shadow mandate to touch. The conspiracy is not a secret. It is written down. It is being shouted from the rooftops. The true question is, are you listening, and are you prepared to launch the greatest act of civil defiance by defending the very idea of a non-partisan, free republic? The clock is ticking on the mandate.